60 years, just typing it, or even saying it out loud. 60 years, a milestone. You spend your whole life building towards moments like this, don't you? You picture the quiet warmth, the simple joy. You see the laughter, the familiar faces of the people you love most gathered around you. That's what I pictured. I pictured my daughter, Claire, maybe my son-in-law, George, and my sweet granddaughter, Sarah, perhaps a little cake, a few candles, nothing grand, just together. Claire had called that morning, her voice a little hurried, saying work was crazy busy, and Sarah had a last-minute tutoring session. They promised we'd celebrate the next day. It was a little disappointing, sure, but life gets busy. I understood. So, the evening of my 60th birthday, I found myself sitting quietly at my little house on the Ridge Hideaway, scrolling through social media on my phone, just passing the time. And that's when I saw this, a video, a celebration. My thumb froze. Inside a lavish private dining room at the Grand Majestic Hotel, there was Claire and George and little Sarah. Standing right alongside them was Walter, my ex-husband, and next to him, with a cake in front of her, beaming, was Beverly, his new wife, the woman he left me for, all those years ago. They were singing happy birthday to her, and then my heart just stopped. Claire turned towards Beverly, a warm, affectionate smile on her face, and she said it, clear as day. She called her Mom. In that single moment, sitting alone on my 60th birthday, I learned the most painful truth about sacrifice, about family, and about betrayal. This isn't just a story about a birthday gone wrong. This is the story of that night that felt like the end of one life and the sudden, sharp beginning of another. It's the path that led me there, and the long, unexpected journey back to myself. It's a story about finally learning what it means to let go, about finding your own strength when you feel like you have none left, and realizing that sometimes the greatest love you find is your own. But before we dive deeper into that moment, that discovery that shattered everything I thought I knew, let me take you back to where it all began, to the foundation I built, piece by piece, and the tiny cracks I somehow missed, our happily ever after. If you could even call it that, ended abruptly on our 10th anniversary. It wasn't a quiet fade, like an old photograph losing its color. No, it was a deliberate, crushing blow. Walter and I, we had built a life together in Maplewood House, a comfortable life, or so I thought. We had Claire, our precious little girl, who was everything to us. Then Beverly came into the picture. She was a widow, Walter said, with 2 young children, Frank and Valerie. Their father had passed away tragically. At first, it was just talk. Walter mentioned them, how difficult things must be. Then it was helping out, little things, slipping them some money here and there, behind my back. When I found out, it caused our first real fight. His face turned red, his voice loud, accusing me of being heartless. He called me cold for not understanding their pitiful situation. I was shocked, heartless, for questioning why he was giving money to a stranger's family behind my wife's back. It didn't make sense, but the real blow came later. One afternoon, he came home. He wasn't alone. Beverly was with him, and so were Frank and Valerie. They stood there, small and shy. Walter looked at me, his expression strangely detached. He said Frank and Valerie were pitiful. He said they needed a father, and then he said he was going to be that father. For them, I stood there, frozen. It wasn't a discussion, it wasn't a request, it was a declaration. He was leaving us, leaving Claire, right there, in the entryway of our home on Maplewood House. He held divorce papers in his hand. He said Frank and Valerie were too young. They needed stability. They needed him, our daughter, Claire, just a little girl then, was clinging to his leg, sobbing uncontrollably, her tiny voice pleading, "Daddy, don't go, please stay." But Walter never wavered, not for a second. He turned his back on her, on me, and walked away with Beverly and her children without so much as a look back. I didn't beg, pride, maybe, or maybe just the sheer shock of it all. I took the divorce settlement. It was more than half of what he owned. Surprisingly, I didn't fight for him to stay, but I fought for Claire. She was all I had left. I worried about her. The trauma of seeing her father abandon her so easily. I worried about her growing up in a new family, with a stepfather. So, I left Maplewood House with Claire. I changed her last name to mine, my maiden name, because I didn't want her carrying his anymore, for fear that a stepfather, not Walter, but perhaps someone down the road if I ever remarried, which I knew instantly I wouldn't, might mistreat her. Her name was now Claire, my last name. When you hold a child, small and trembling, heartbroken and confused by the man who was supposed to be her hero, her protector, you realize some promises are fragile. Some bonds are easily broken, and the pain of that break, it leaves a scar that runs deeper than you can ever imagine. So, I built a new life, just Claire and me. We moved to a small place on Cherry Blossom Lane, a life forged in sacrifice, built on the ruins of what was supposed to be our future. Little did I know then how much I would eventually give of myself for that life, and how little, ultimately, I would receive in return. The years stretched ahead, full of unknowns, but back then, my only focus was her, always her. For 20 years, my universe began and ended with one name, Claire. After Walter left, our little place on Cherry Blossom Lane became our sanctuary. My entire focus narrowed, sharpened, until it was entirely centered on this one small, precious human being. I worked hard, sometimes juggling 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. Every dollar I earned, every decision I made, every single ounce of my energy, it was all for her, to make sure she had everything she needed, everything I could possibly give her. Those early years weren't easy. The pain of the divorce, of seeing her father walk away so easily, took a toll on Claire. She struggled. There were nightmares, times when she couldn't even bear to go to school. During those periods, I didn't hesitate. I quit one of my jobs, the one that paid best but demanded too much time away, so I could be there, to hold her when she cried out for him in her sleep, to hum the lullabies I used to sing, sitting by her bed until her breathing had finally evened out. My back ached, my arms were numb from holding her, but seeing her face finally peaceful, that was my reward. She was such a sweet child. Sometimes, after I'd been holding her all night, she'd notice how stiff I was. She'd take my hand, her tiny fingers trying to rub my arm, whispering, "Mommy, I'll make it better. I'll make the pain go away." Those little moments, those small acts of love, they fueled me. I watched her grow. Through school, through college, saw her fall in love with a good man, George. He seemed kind, thoughtful, respectful. He treated me like his own mother, always making sure I was comfortable, thanking me for everything. When they decided to buy a house, the Pinecrest residence, I didn't have to think twice. Housing prices were soaring, and they were working hard, but just couldn't quite make it work. So, I helped. More than helped, really. I pitched in significantly for the down payment, and for years after. I continued to help with the mortgage payments, the utilities, the groceries, even little things, like Sarah's art lessons. Their life in the city was expensive, demanding. I had savings from the divorce settlement, from all those years of careful living, and it felt right to use it to ensure their security, their happiness. When Sarah was born, oh, my sweet Sarah, she was the most beautiful, most joyful little thing. She brought so much light into our lives. I was already living with them by then, helping out. It just made sense. Claire and George had demanding jobs, long hours. With me there, I could take care of Sarah, manage the household, make sure dinner was on the table. They could focus on their careers without worrying about childcare or who would pick Sarah up from school. Sarah always called me Grandma in that soft, endearing voice that just melted my heart. I spent my days caring for her, running the house, making sure their lives ran smoothly. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. My days revolved around the Pinecrest residence and the 3 people who lived there. I poured my soul into that life. Every dollar I contributed, every ounce of energy I spent keeping the house spotless, every dream I might have had for myself. It all went to them. You convince yourself that's what love is. Complete, unconditional giving. And in the process, you build a world around them. You build it so solid, so safe, that you truly believe nothing can shake its foundation. I felt secure. I felt needed. I felt, after all the heartache, that I had finally built a family, a real family unit that was strong and whole. And then, just like that, the day arrived, my 60th birthday, the day that everything I believed in, the life I had poured myself into, suddenly, unexpectedly, completely fell apart. 60 years, all I wanted, after decades of putting everyone else first, was a simple celebration with my family. Just a little warmth, a little noise, the people I love most. But that morning, the phone rang. It was Claire. Her voice was a little hurried, a little distant. "Mom," she said, "I'm so sorry, but work is just crazy today. Absolutely swamped. And Sarah, you won't believe it. Her tutoring session got moved last minute. It's right after school." She sounded tired, stressed. "We'll celebrate properly tomorrow. Okay, promise. Just a last-minute thing, completely unavoidable." Of course, I said it was fine. "Okay, honey, don't worry about it. Work comes first. We'll do it tomorrow." My heart sank a little, just a tiny bit. But I pushed it down. Life gets busy. They worked hard. George had his demanding job. Claire had hers. They were building their lives. I understood. Truly, I did. So I spent the day in quiet anticipation that never quite bloomed. I had tidied up the house at the Ridge Hideaway, the small, peaceful place I had recently moved into. I even baked a small cake for myself, just a little something to mark the day. Getting older, you become a bit sentimental about these milestones, even when you're alone. I set the cake on the coffee table, placed a few candles on it. I didn't light them. There was no point. It felt quiet, too quiet. As the evening wore on, the silence felt heavier. I tried to distract myself, scrolling through social media on my phone, just looking at local news, community groups, anything to pass the time, pictures of friends' grandchildren, neighborhood events. Nothing particularly interesting. Then, as I was about to exit the app, my finger brushed against a suggested video thumbnail. It caught my eye. A local video, tagged with the Grand Majestic Hotel. A lavish private dining room. It looked like some kind of party, curiosity, or maybe just boredom, made me tap on it without really thinking. And there they were, Claire, George, Sarah, standing together, smiling. Relief washed over me for a split second. Maybe they had finished work early. Maybe this was the surprise celebration after all. But then the camera panned slightly, and that's when I saw him, Walter, and beside him, Beverly. Her 2 children, Frank and Valerie, were there too. 6 people gathered around a table, a cake in the center. My breath hitched. Walter, Beverly. At a lavish dinner on my birthday. A wave of unease, cold and sharp, washed over me. They were singing happy birthday. Not to me. The camera focused on Beverly. She was beaming, radiant, dressed in an elegant gown, still living like a princess. I thought bitterly, it was her birthday. Of course it was. Our birthdays were on the same day. I had almost forgotten that small, cruel detail. Beverly never mentioned it, not to me. But I knew from stray comments Claire used to make that she wished our families could be whole again. Whole. The woman who took my whole, then, as the song ended, the moment that is forever burned into my memory, happened. Claire turned towards Beverly. Her smile was so soft, so affectionate, completely genuine, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in I couldn't even remember how long. And she looked right at the woman her father chose over her, the woman he brought into our lives to break us apart, the woman I had shielded Claire from, had taught her to despise. And she called her Mom. "Happy birthday, Mom," Claire whispered, her voice soft and warm. My phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the floor. The video kept playing, the sound tinny and distant. My chest tightened with a dull, heavy ache, different from pain, more like disbelief. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Mom? She called Beverly Mom. All those years, all the sacrifice, all the pain I had endured, all the work I had done to protect her from the reality of what Walter and Beverly did. And she had not only forgiven them, not only embraced them, but she had replaced me with the person who had stolen her father. In that moment, looking at the video of my daughter, her family, and the man who left us, celebrating the woman he chose over me, while I sat alone with a single, unlit candle, it hit me. You give everything. You pour your soul into building a life for someone else. And in one shattering moment, with one small, innocent-sounding word, the person you did it all for shows you were just a placeholder. The shock and the raw, undeniable pain quickly gave way to something else. Something hot and fierce. Anger. I couldn't sit there anymore. I needed answers. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, those answers were waiting at the Pinecrest residence. The answer would come into my house, and it would come into my life. At the end of that very long day, hours crawled by. After seeing that video, after hearing that word, Mom, from Claire's lips, directed at Beverly, I couldn't just sit there. My quiet house on the Ridge Hideaway suddenly felt suffocating. A strange, hot knot of disbelief and fury tightened in my chest. I tidied things aimlessly, trying to keep my hands busy, but my mind was a whirlwind. How could she? After everything I knew, they would come back eventually. They had to. This was their home. And so, I waited. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked loudly in the silence. Each tick seemed to amplify the emptiness, the feeling of being forgotten, replaced, finally. Much later than I expected. I heard the car pull into the driveway, the familiar sounds of the garage door opening, footsteps. I stayed in the living room, the untouched birthday cake on the coffee table, like a silent, painful witness. The front door opened. Claire stepped inside first. She moved slowly, almost tiptoeing, as if she were afraid of waking someone. Her expression was carefully composed, framed by stray strands of hair that looked a little out of place. She let out a theatrical sigh, rolling her shoulders. "Mom," she called out, her voice edged with feigned exhaustion. "We're home." Ugh, work was brutal today. George followed her in, holding Sarah's hand. They were still chatting quietly about the evening, about the banquet, a word that made my stomach clench. George saw me sitting there first. His step faltered. Claire turned her head, her eyes meeting mine, and her expression froze. The practiced weariness on her face vanished, replaced by a flicker of something, panic guilt, I couldn't quite tell. Sarah, ever the little actress, sensing the shift in the air but not understanding, blinked her big, innocent eyes and stretched out her arms towards me. "Grandma," she chirped, her voice bright, a stark contrast to the tension filling the room. "I missed you. Hug me." She ran towards me, expecting the usual warm embrace, the lift into my lap. But this time, I didn't move. I couldn't. Looking at her, this sweet child I adored, who seemed blissfully unaware of the earthquake that had just rocked my world, and then looking at Claire, standing there with a lie on her lips, something inside me just locked down. My gaze lifted from Sarah, past George, and fixed on Claire's face. Her smile was gone. She approached me cautiously, trying to regain her composure. "Mom, is everything okay?" she asked, her voice a little too light. "You didn't... We said we'd celebrate tomorrow. Remember, we were just so busy." My eyes landed on the small cake on the coffee table. Claire's gaze followed mine. She paused. "Oh," she said, her voice softening slightly. Did you buy this for yourself?" There was something in her eyes then, a deepening shadow. Guilt. Yes, it was definitely guilt. Maybe seeing that little cake, so small compared to the one I'd seen in the video, finally broke through her pretense. There was no point in playing this game any longer. The weight of the truth, the sheer audacity of it, was crushing me. I looked at her directly, my voice quiet, but filled with an icy calm that surprised even myself. "Claire," I said. Her name hung in the air. "Where did you go today?" She stiffened. Her eyes darted away for a split second, then back to mine, searching, scrambling for an answer. I could almost see the thoughts racing behind her eyes. How to lie, how to deflect, how to twist this back on me. In the end, she chose denial. She forced a tight smile. "What are you talking about?" "Mom, I was at work, of course." She glanced at George for support. George, bless his passive soul, nodded immediately. "Yeah, Mom. Work was crazy today. Riley was on her feet all day. Her back's killing her." He stumbled slightly over her name. "Riley?" It had been so long since anyone called her that, her original name, the one she begged me to change after Walter left. Hearing it now felt like a strange echo. Then Sarah, eager to copy the adults, shook her head so hard it was a wonder she didn't get dizzy. "Grandma," she piped up, her tiny voice wavering slightly. "We didn't eat cake today. We didn't—" Children are terrible liars. The more they spoke, the easier it was to see through them. The lie was pathetic. Claire's eyes widened slightly as Sarah spoke, and she barely had time to reach out and cover Sarah's mouth with her hand. It was too late. The truth was out, confirmed by an innocent child who didn't even know what she was saying. Claire could only force an awkward smile, her hand still over Sarah's mouth. "Mom, don't misunderstand." Claire tried again, pulling Sarah closer. "Annie, Sarah got a little restless at my office today, so I just bought her a little cupcake to keep her occupied." The lie was unraveling fast. It wasn't just pathetic, it was insulting. The disappointment in my chest settled like a heavy, cold stone. Words felt useless. I reached for my phone, still lying on the floor where it had fallen. I picked it up, found the video again, and without saying a word, I tossed it onto the coffee table, right in front of her. Her eyes followed the phone. She saw the video playing, the scene in the Grand Majestic, the faces, the cake, Beverly. Her lips parted slightly, as if she were searching for an explanation, a way out, something to say, but no words came. Her composure crumbled. With a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years, she sank onto the couch next to me. The pretense was gone. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, but with a new edge I hadn't heard before, a defiant edge. "Mom," she said, not looking at me, staring at the video. "It's been so many years. I know you hate Dad, but he's still my father. For your sake. I've barely seen him all these years. Haven't I done enough?" My blood ran cold. "For my sake," she continued, her voice rising slightly, gaining momentum. "You're not young anymore. Why can't you just let this go? And even if you can't, why drag me into it every year on your birthday? Have I ever not been here for you? Beverly's birthday is on the same day as yours. She never says it out loud, but she wishes our family could be whole again. So I thought, what's the difference? We all live together. So why not celebrate hers first and yours tomorrow? Mom, you're getting old. Stop being so childish." Childish. She called me childish. The woman who had given up her life, her dreams, her financial security, her very identity for her daughter. My vision blurred for a moment. George was standing there, silent. Sarah was watching, confused. And Claire was accusing me. Accusing me of being the problem, of holding on to pain that she felt was inconvenient. "George and I work hard every day," she went on, as if defending herself from an attack. "And honestly, it's easier for me when I spend time with Dad and Beverly. They understand." She finally turned to look at me, her eyes hard. "But look at you, acting like this. Can't you think about me for once?" My breath hitched. Think about her. Every fiber of my being screamed in protest. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every missed opportunity, every dollar I had given them, it all flashed before my eyes. My own flesh and blood, the person I had carried, loved, sacrificed everything for. She had become the knife that cut the deepest, and she was blaming me for the wound, the pain, the disappointment, the raw injustice of it all. It twisted into something I couldn't control, something primal. My hand moved before I even registered the thought. It was a slap. Sharp, loud, echoing in the silent room. My palms stung. Claire gasped, stumbling back, her hand flying to her cheek. Her eyes, wide with shock, met mine. "Mom," she whispered, disbelieving. You hit me again?" "Yes, again." I had slapped her once before, years ago, when she was a teenager and lied about something trivial. But this was different. This wasn't a correction. This was a raw, desperate act of a broken heart lashing out. I stared at her, the daughter I had loved more than life itself. And looking at her now, with that mixture of shock and rising anger on her face, that sense of entitlement, I felt nothing but emptiness, a cold, detached realization, the final severing. The last thread that had kept me tethered to her, to this life, had just snapped. This girl, this woman, she was no longer my child. "Mom, what the hell is wrong with you?" Her voice rose, shaky with fury. "Why would you hit me? No wonder Dad preferred Catherine. She's gentle and sweet, not some bitter old woman who can't let go." The name, Catherine, instead of Beverly, was a small detail I barely registered. All I heard was the accusation, the comparison, the final, brutal blow. Tears welled up in her eyes, not of pain, but of anger, of indignation. I felt nothing but a vast, cold emptiness. I didn't know what to do next. My heart was shattered into a million pieces. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I couldn't stay there. Not for another second. Not in this house, filled with lies and bitter accusations, with the person I loved most standing there, blaming me for her own choices. I thought that moment, the slap, the accusations, the sheer, raw pain of it all, was the absolute low point. But life, it seems, always has one more trick up its sleeve. After Claire ran into her room, with George and Sarah rushing after her, murmuring worriedly, I just stood there. The silence in the living room of the Pinecrest residence was deafening, broken only by the muffled sounds of sobbing from Claire's room. My hands still stung. My heart felt like it had been ripped out. They thought I was being childish, a bitter old woman. They didn't see the decades of unwavering love, the countless sacrifices, the foundation I had built for them with my bare hands and bruised heart. Something inside me, finally, irrevocably broke. A voice, quiet but firm, spoke in my head. "You are done. Done giving, done sacrificing, done being the one who always understands, who always forgives, who always takes the blame." I didn't belong here anymore. Not in this house, not in this life where my own daughter saw me as an obstacle to her desire for a whole family. A family built on the very ruins of the one I had fought to protect. Without a second thought, I walked to the guest room where I kept my few belongings. I pulled out a small suitcase I hadn't used in years and began to pack. Quickly, efficiently. There wasn't much, just clothes, toiletries, a few books. As I packed, the image of Claire's face in that video, calling Beverly Mom, flashed in my mind. Then her face just moments ago, accusing me. And then the look of guilt when she saw that little cake I'd bought for myself. For years. Riley, Claire and George. They had worked hard. But with the cost of living, the mortgage on Pinecrest residence, Sarah's expenses, they were stretched thin. Every month, I had helped cover not just the mortgage and utilities, but even things like Sarah's art lessons. It wasn't a small amount. I had felt sorry for them, wanting to ease their burden. But now that burden was theirs to carry. What Riley didn't know was that I had another property, a small, quiet place I had bought years ago, just in case. Just in case things went wrong. Just in case George wasn't as good as he seemed, or in case the past ever came back to haunt us. I had kept it a secret, planning to leave it to Claire someday. But that was before. Now, the Ridge Hideaway would be my refuge, with my savings. I could live comfortably there, on my own terms. I closed my suitcase. The small birthday cake still sat on the coffee table, untouched, the candles unlit. It looked so pathetic, so lonely. I took one last look around the Pinecrest residence. The house I had poured my money, my time, my heart into. It no longer felt like home. It felt like a cage. I walked out the front door. I didn't look back. The next day, I woke up at the Ridge Hideaway. The quiet was a balm to my soul, a stark contrast to the tension I had been living in. I took a long shower, washed away the residue of the past few days. There were no missed calls, no messages, not one. My daughter, the child I had raised for over 20 years, the child I had just left, nothing. It should have hurt. It did. A little. But mostly, there was just emptiness and a strange sense of relief. Maybe pain was a good thing. Maybe it would finally stop me from second-guessing myself, from thinking about turning back. I decided I needed to do something for myself, something that wasn't about taking care of anyone else. I hadn't been shopping for myself in years. Not really. My clothes were practical, functional. All my time, all my money had gone to Pinecrest residence and the people living there. Now, that burden was lifted. My savings, accumulated from years of careful living and recent investment returns, were more than enough for me. So, I went to the Willow Creek Promenade, just to walk around, maybe buy myself something nice, something beautiful, just for me. I wasn't really looking for anything specific, just browsing, enjoying the simple act of being me, on my own, making my own choices. I was walking into a clothing store, feeling a lightness I hadn't felt in years, when I ran into him, Walter. He was walking side by side with Beverly, about to enter the same store. Walter looked uneasy when he saw me, his gaze flickering away quickly. But Beverly? Beverly smiled, broadly. Her expression was smug, triumphant, as insufferably arrogant as ever. "Oh, Laura," she exclaimed, her voice loud, deliberately drawing attention. She used my first name, Laura. That had been my name back then. "Fancy running into you here. Shopping for clothes, too." She let her eyes roam over me, up and down, slowly. Then she shook her head dramatically, a theatrical sigh escaping her lips. "Goodness, you're always so busy taking care of the house and the kids, even if you buy something nice. When will you have time to wear it?" She leaned in slightly, dropping her voice into a faux whisper, but loud enough for nearby shoppers to hear. "Or did you finally set your sights on some old man and want to dress up a little?" A few people nearby turned their heads, drawn in by the obvious provocation. People love gossip. But if Beverly thought she could humiliate me in public, she was in for a surprise. My bitterness, my pain, my anger, it all coalesced into a sudden, cold clarity. I smiled, a thin, sharp smile. More shoppers were turning to look now. "Oh, but how could I ever compare to you, Beverly?" I said, my voice calm, cutting through the air. I let out a dramatic gasp of my own. "The way you threw yourself into my husband's arms right after your own died, bringing along your 2 kids, of course." With talent like that, I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. I could never hope to compete. The store fell silent. Stunned silence. Realization dawned on some faces. Then, a woman near the entrance gasped, "Oh, so she's the old home wrecker?" Beverly's face flushed angry red. Walter stepped forward immediately, his jaw clenched. "Laura, that's enough." I turned, gesturing towards him as I addressed the growing crowd. "Everyone meet the man who left his own daughter behind. Because someone else's kids needed a father more." My voice gained strength, carrying across the store. He abandoned his own child without looking back, but he was more than happy to play daddy to someone else's. I paused, looking directly at Walter, a cruel smile on my face. "And guess what? Those kids, Frank and Valerie, they still only call him Uncle." That part hit deep. It was a wound Walter had never been able to heal, even after all these years, even after raising Frank and Valerie like his own. They had never truly acknowledged him as their father. Now, being called out in public, his carefully constructed facade crumbling, he could do nothing but stand there, his face dark with anger, fists clenched at his sides. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone muttered, "What a fool!" Another snickered. Talk about being a doormat. Beverly's fury was visible in every tense muscle of her face. But instead of arguing, she grabbed Walter's arm, yanking him towards the exit. Just then, as if fate had a twisted sense of humor, Claire appeared. She was walking through the mall, coming off work. She saw Walter and Beverly first. Catherine, what's wrong?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. The frustration and anger that had consumed Beverly just moments ago instantly melted away. She straightened her posture, shifting into a pitiful stance. She turned to Claire with a sigh. "Oh, Riley," she said, using that old name again. "It's nothing. Your mother's still upset with me, I suppose. I shouldn't have asked you to celebrate my birthday with me." Her voice was soft, filled with just the right amount of sadness. Claire's eyes snapped to me, her lips pressed into a thin line, still upset from our fight earlier. But she didn't hesitate. She took Beverly's hand, turning on me with an accusatory glare. "Mom," she said, her voice rising, "do you have to keep throwing a tantrum like this? Just look at Catherine. She's kind, gentle, and understanding. Meanwhile, you're always so bitter and angry. Do you really wonder why Dad chose her over you?" Her words were a dagger, sharp and precise, straight to my heart. Kind, gentle, understanding. Beverly, the woman who had just mocked me, who had participated in tearing my family apart. And I was bitter angry because I hadn't embraced the woman who stole my husband and then watched my daughter choose her. Something snapped. All the pain, all the fury, all the heartbreak of the past 20 years, of the night before, of this very moment, it culminated in a single, explosive act. My hand raced out. I didn't think, I didn't hesitate. I slapped her, harder this time. She gasped, stumbling back, her hand flying to her cheek. Her eyes were wide with shock. "Mom," she choked out, her voice trembling. "You hit me? Again. What the hell?" I stared at her. The daughter I had loved more than life itself. The child who had clung to my leg, begging her father to stay. The girl who had sobbed in my arms, asking why he didn't want her. And now, this woman, standing here, defending the woman who took him, blaming me for his choice. Looking at her now, I felt nothing. Just emptiness. It was a cold, detached realization. The final severing, the last thread that had kept me tethered to her, to this life, had just snapped. This girl, this woman, she was no longer my child. Not mine, not anymore. I reached out, my hand moving, not to hit her again, but to push her, gently but firmly. I pushed her towards Beverly and Walter. "If you love them so much," I said, my voice quiet, devoid of emotion, "then go ahead. Call them Mom and Dad. I have no interest in being your mother anymore." Claire let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. She looped her arm through Beverly's, as if to spite me. "Fine," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Who needs a mother like you? Anyway, Catherine is a better mom than you ever were. At least she knows how to let go of the past instead of wallowing in it like some bitter old hag." She turned to Walter and Beverly, pulling them closer. "I'm coming home with you tonight. We're gonna have a real family dinner, not sit around sulking over things that happened decades ago." As she spoke, gesturing wildly, something fell out of her pocket. It hit the floor with a soft sound, a driver's license. Instinctively, my gaze flicked down. The ID had landed face up. The photo was recent. The name, clearly printed Riley Spencer. Riley. Her original name? The one she begged me to change to mine after Walter left. The name I had forgotten, replaced by Claire for so many years. Claire's eyes followed my gaze. She saw the ID. She hesitated, a flicker of something, guilt, shame, crossing her face. But she quickly masked it, brushing a hand over her nose. "What?" she said, trying to sound nonchalant. "It's just a name, isn't it? Isn't it normal for kids to take their father's surname? Dad doesn't have any other children carrying his name. I was just making things right." Her irritation grew, her voice laced with annoyance. "Do you really have to make a big deal out of this, too? Making things right, taking his name. The man who had abandoned her without a second thought. The name she had pleaded with me to erase, I didn't say a word. I just stood there, staring at the name, remembering that little girl curled up in my arms sobbing. I don't want Dad anymore. It's just us now. Mommy, we're the only family we need. I want to have your last name so we can always be together. Now she was Riley Spencer. She had erased the last remaining tie between us. The name I had given her, the name I had protected, was gone. I lifted my hand, not to hit her again, just to wave her off. My voice was calm, devoid of emotion. Do whatever you want, I said. Your name, your life, it has nothing to do with me anymore. That day, in the middle of a busy mall, surrounded by strangers, I didn't just lose a daughter. I lost the person I had spent 20 years being, the identity of Riley's mother. Claire's mom was gone, and in that loss, I found a strange, empty space, a space ready for something new, ready for me. I walked away. I left them there, standing together, Claire, Beverly, Walter. I didn't look back. On the way home, I blocked Riley's number. Every contact, every connection severed. It was done. I was done. I would not let anyone hurt me like that, bother me, ever again. I returned to the Ridge Hideaway, my hidden house, my refuge, but life. Life had one more unexpected turn waiting, because while I was finding my peace, the world I had just stepped out of was about to catch fire. I didn't run away. Not really. It felt more like I ran towards something. Towards a quiet I hadn't known in decades. Towards a space where I could just breathe. After leaving the Pinecrest residence, after that final searing conversation at the Willow Creek Promenade, I drove back to the Ridge Hideaway, my little hidden house. Stepping inside, the air felt different, lighter. There was still a hollowness in my chest, a vast empty space where my identity as Claire's mother used to be. But there was also a strange sense of peace, the weight of constant responsibility, of unspoken expectations, of being needed and then suddenly unwanted. It began to lift. The Ridge Hideaway wasn't grand like the Pinecrest residence. It was small, cozy, nestled amongst trees, overlooking a valley. The quiet was profound. I spent the first few days just sitting by the window, watching the light change, taking long walks along the winding paths, listening to the birds, the rustling leaves. I started tending to the small garden, pulling weeds, planting a few simple flowers. There was a quiet satisfaction in working the soil with my hands, in nurturing something that was solely mine, for my own enjoyment. It wasn't about providing for someone else, or keeping up appearances. It was just creating beauty for the sake of beauty. Slowly, tentatively, the emptiness began to fill, not with the people I had lost, but with the simple rhythm of my own life. Reading books I'd never had time for, brewing a single cup of tea just the way I liked it, deciding, just because I felt like it, to drive to the coast for a day trip, breathing in the salty air and watching the waves crash against the shore. I still had the savings, the money I had guarded for so long, initially planning it for Claire. But now it was mine to use for me. I realized I had spent so many years pouring everything into one place, one person, that I had forgotten there was a whole world out there, a world I had never seen, never explored. So I booked a trip, a group tour, just a week along a scenic coastline, then some mountain trails. It felt strange at first, traveling alone, not needing to worry about anyone else's schedule, anyone else's needs. But it was also liberating. On that trip, I met Helen. She was around my age, traveling alone too. We hit it off instantly. As we talked over dinner one evening, sharing stories about our lives, I learned she had a story not so different from mine. She had dedicated her whole life to her husband and children, raising them, caring for them. And when she finally expressed a desire to do something for herself, to travel, to see the world she had put on hold, her own children had reacted with disbelief, even anger. At your age, they'd said, you should be home, taking care of the grandkids. What kind of woman runs off for fun? They called her selfish. It resonated deeply with me. They called me selfish too. Maybe I was. But after years of giving everything away, every piece of yourself, every dream, maybe filling your own cup isn't selfish. Maybe it's necessary. Helen and I shared our regrets, our disappointments, but also our newfound determination to live the rest of our lives for us. We promised to stay in touch, maybe even plan another trip together. When I returned to the Ridge Hideaway, I carried that feeling of possibility with me. I wanted to keep creating, keep exploring. That's when I stumbled upon the Harmony Clay Studio in a nearby town. Walking in, the smell of damp earth, the quiet hum of the pottery wheels. It felt like stepping into a sanctuary. I signed up for a class. Learning to work with clay was transformative. Taking a lump of earth and shaping it with my hands, feeling the cool, wet material respond to my touch. It required focus, patience. Every wobbly line, every collapsed pot was a lesson. But when I finally pulled a piece from the kiln, something I had shaped, something beautiful that hadn't existed before, the satisfaction was profound. It was something I created, just for the joy of creating. It was mine, no one else's. While I was rebuilding my world, piece by quiet piece, finding simple joys and unexpected connections. The world I had just walked out of, the world of the Pinecrest residents and the people who lived there. That world was about to catch fire. They say what goes around comes around. That life has a way of balancing the scales. Sometimes, the debt isn't paid in quiet reflection or heartfelt apologies. Sometimes, it's paid in fire. I had settled into a comfortable routine at the Ridge Hideaway. My days were filled with my quiet pursuits, gardening, reading, working at the Harmony Clay Studio. I hadn't heard from Claire or George, or anyone from that life. Since I left, I had cut off contact, and they hadn't tried to reach out. And honestly, I hadn't missed the drama, the tension that had simmered beneath the surface at the Pinecrest residence, even when things seemed calm. One afternoon, while I was trimming the small rose bushes outside my house, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but it had a local area code from my old neighborhood. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to answer. Laura, is that you?" The voice on the other end was bright, breathless, filled with excitement. It took me a second to place it. Mildred from the old neighborhood. Mildred, who was, shall we say, the unofficial news channel of Cherry Blossom Lane and the surrounding areas. If something happened, Mildred knew about it, and she knew about it first, and she never kept it to herself. "Mildred, yes, it's me," I said, a little surprised. We had always gotten along well enough. Even after I moved away years ago, she'd check in from time to time, a quick call to see how I was doing, reminding me that if I ever needed anything at all, I only had to ask. I had always appreciated her kindness. "Oh, Laura, you won't believe what happened." Her voice was practically vibrating with anticipation. Mildred loved a good story, and clearly, she had a doozy. I braced myself. "What is it, Mildred? Pinecrest residence Claire's house. It burned down," she announced, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Completely burned just last night." My hand froze on the rose bush. Burned down Claire's house. The house I had poured so much money into, I felt a jolt. But it wasn't panic. It was something else. Mildred didn't wait for me to respond. She launched into a full report, like a seasoned news anchor. Oh, it was a sight. Laura sirens everywhere. The whole neighborhood was out watching. Apparently, it was that no-good stepson of hers, Frank. You know, Beverly's boy. He had his friends over, drinking, carrying on. Mildred's voice dropped slightly, though still loud enough to convey the drama. And one of them, well, they were smoking, apparently right there in the living room, and there was alcohol everywhere, open bottles. She paused for dramatic effect. 1 minute, everything's normal. "Well, as normal as it gets with that crowd," she added with a sniff. "The next, smoke fire. Frank and his friends came running out first, scrambling over each other, didn't even try to put it out. And then, oh, this is the good part." Mildred's voice lowered conspiratorially. "George had just come home from work, saw the smoke. He ran up, Tried to get in, but Frank was already out. And can you believe it? Laura, that Frank. He started cursing George. Blamed him for having a crappy house that caught fire. Said it was George's fault he almost died. George who paid for everything. And George, well, George just lost it. Mildred described the scene with vivid detail. George, usually so calm, snapping, a full-blown fight breaking out right there in the street, in front of everyone. Neighbors running to break it up, but neither George nor Frank would back down. Punches were thrown, shouting, chaos. And then Claire showed up, Mildred said, her voice full of morbid fascination. Driving up right into the middle of it all, saw her house on fire, saw George fighting with that Frank. You should have seen her face like she'd been struck by lightning. According to Mildred, the moment Claire arrived, George and Frank stopped fighting each other and turned on her. Together, ripped into her, throwing blame from all directions, cursing her out, accusing her of being the root of all evil, of bringing these people into their lives, of not being a good mother, a good wife, all the frustrations, all the resentment that had been building up. It all exploded, directed at Claire. Mildred giggled slightly. Oh, it was primetime entertainment. Laura, the whole neighborhood gathered, and little Sarah crying her eyes out. It was just a mess, a complete and utter disaster, burnt to the ground. Laura, nothing left. She paused, letting that sink in. Unlivable, nothing salvaged. Mildred sighed, a sound of satisfied finality. Well, she said, evil people always meet their match, don't they? A daughter like that. Honestly, Laura, she wasn't worth it, after how she treated you. Leaving you alone on your birthday, celebrating with, well, you know. She waited for my response, but I didn't say anything. I just listened. As I listened to Mildred's breathless account, looking at the tranquil beauty of the Ridge Hideaway around me, a strange calmness settled over me. There wasn't a single trace of pity in me. Not anymore. I didn't feel heartbreak for them. I didn't feel sorry. I only felt that life had never been more ironic. My daughter, who had thrown me away for a whole family, built on a lie, now had nothing, homeless, blamed, alone. They say what goes around comes around. Watching from afar, through Mildred's excited narration, I saw the truth in that. The consequences were undeniable, but the taste wasn't as sweet as I might have imagined. It was just quiet. A quiet acknowledgement that the chapter was closed. The house I had poured my life into was gone. Mildred continued to talk, speculating about what they would do, where they would go. Probably Walter and Beverly will take them in. Right, she mused. After all, Riley called her mom now, didn't she? That's what family does. But I knew, with a chilling certainty, that wasn't how this story would end. Losing their home was one thing. But the greatest realization for Claire was yet to come, because when they ran to the very people she had chosen, those people would close the door in their faces, and then she would truly understand what it felt like to be abandoned. Life has a way of leading you back to the start, doesn't it? Back to the very people you thought were the answer, only to find they were the ones holding the lock. After Mildred's call, I tried to put the news from the Pinecrest residence out of my mind. It was a tragedy, certainly, for Sarah, most of all, but for Claire and George. A part of me felt a grim sense of justice. Mildred had assumed Walter and Beverly would take them in. After all, Claire had made her choice clear. She had embraced them, called Beverly Mom, taken Walter's name. Surely, this was the moment for that whole family to come together, to support each other in crisis. Mildred kept me updated over the next few days. The Pinecrest residence was a total loss. Claire, George, and Sarah were staying in a temporary shelter. George's family had passed away years ago. Claire had no other close relatives besides me. But I was no longer an option. The obvious place, the only place they could turn to, was Evergreen Manor, Walter and Beverly's sprawling, luxurious home, the very symbol of the life Claire had chosen over the one I had built for her. Mildred, ever the intrepid reporter, called me again a few days later, practically buzzing with the latest development. "Laura, you are not going to believe this." "What now, Mildred?" I asked, my voice calm. Nothing she said could surprise me anymore. They went to Walter and Beverly's Claire and George, and Sarah packed up their few things and went to Evergreen Manor, hoping they'd take them in, and I prompted, already knowing the answer deep down. Mildred's voice became a stage whisper, though still loud enough to carry the full weight of the drama. Walter wouldn't even let them inside, stood right there on the doorstep, said there was no room. Can you believe the nerve? No room. Evergreen Manor was enormous. Acres of land, multiple guest rooms, no room for his own daughter and granddaughter. Mildred continued, recounting what she'd heard from someone who'd heard from someone else who lived near Evergreen Manor. And Beverly, oh, she was even worse, said something awful, something like, "I only have 2 children, Frank and Valerie. You're not family, you're nothing. You're not family, you're nothing." The words echoed in my mind. Beverly, the woman Claire had chosen, had called Mom, had taken a surname from, denying her existence, her place in that carefully constructed world. Walter, the man Claire had yearned for, who had left her as a child because Beverly's children needed him more, leaving her again when her child needed help. "They just stood there," Mildred said, her voice a mix of shock and something that sounded suspiciously like glee. "On the steps of Evergreen Manor, Claire, George, Sarah, with nowhere to go, Walter just shut the door in their faces, slammed it shut. I pictured it, Claire, standing there, homeless, with her husband and daughter, being rejected by the very people she had embraced, had fought for, had chosen over me. The look on her face as the reality hit her, the realization that their love was conditional, a transaction, based on convenience, on wealth, on maintaining appearances, as long as Claire was useful, as long as she fit into their narrative of a whole family, bringing them grandchildren and help with the house. Perhaps she was accepted, but the moment she brought trouble, burden, consequence caused by Beverly's own son, ironically, she was cast aside, just like I had been, years ago. You choose your family, you sacrifice everything for them, you burn bridges for them, and then you realize their love was conditional, a facade, a transaction, and the price you paid for that empty promise was yourself, your dignity, your original family, everything. I didn't say anything more to Mildred. I thanked her and hung up the phone. I didn't feel pity for Claire. The raw, agonizing pain of her betrayal still lingered, but it was now overlaid with a thick layer of detachment. I simply observed the outcome, the consequence, the karma, as Mildred called it. It wasn't a vengeful satisfaction. It was just a quiet, cold understanding. The cycle was complete. The people Claire had chosen had failed her, abandoned her, just as they had once abandoned me. When all the other doors closed, when the world Claire had chased crumbled into ash and rejection, there was only one place left, one place she had turned her back on, one place where, perhaps, just perhaps, a flicker of something still remained. My door, at the Ridge Hideaway. I didn't know if she would come, but I knew, if she did, I would open it, not with open arms, not with instant forgiveness, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had already walked through hell and found her way back to the light, ready to see. What stood on my doorstep, life at the Ridge Hideaway, had become my anchor. The quiet routine of my days, the simple satisfaction of working with clay, the calm predictability of nature surrounding my little house. It was a sanctuary built on the foundation of my own resilience. I had found a fragile peace, a sense of self that didn't depend on anyone else's approval or presence. I was content. Several weeks passed after Mildred's call about the fire and the subsequent rejection at Evergreen Manor. I heard nothing more. I didn't seek news. That life, the life I had poured myself into, felt like a distant memory, a story I had lived and now simply filed away. One evening, long after dark, I was sitting in my living room, reading by the soft glow of a lamp. The house was still, peaceful. Suddenly, a sound, a tentative, hesitant knock at the front door. My heart didn't leap. It didn't race with fear or anticipation. It simply paused. I knew, with a strange certainty, who would be standing there. After all the other doors had closed, when the gilded promises turned to dust and ash, there was only one place left to go. I got up slowly, walked to the door. I didn't rush. I didn't feel angry or vengeful or even deeply sad anymore. Just a quiet readiness to observe, to see what stood before me. I opened the door. She was standing there. Claire. Alone. She looked tired, worn down, her shoulders slumped, her hair messy. Not the polished, confident woman I had seen in the video, celebrating at the Grand Majestic. Not the angry, accusatory daughter from the Willow Creek Promenade. Just someone who looked lost. Her eyes met mine. There was no defiance, no accusation, only regret, humility. I couldn't quite read it all. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Her throat looked dry. We stood there in silence for what felt like an eternity. The cool night air drifted in. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? What was I supposed to feel? Bitterness? Satisfaction that she had finally seen the truth? Or just the persistent, dull ache of knowing that the past could never be undone? In my mind, unbidden, memories surfaced. Claire as a little girl, clutching my leg, begging Walter to stay. Claire sobbing in my arms after he left. Claire carefully rubbing my sore arms, whispering she'd make the pain go away. Claire graduating college, beaming. Claire holding Sarah for the first time. All those years, when it was just us, the silence stretched, thick and heavy between us. And then, finally, she spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, thick with unshed tears. Mom, she couldn't hold back any longer. Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent rivers tracking through the dust on her face. She bit her lip, trying to control the sobs that shook her frame. Mom, she whispered again, louder this time, the words catching in her throat. I was wrong. I shouldn't have lied to you. I shouldn't have stood by them. I shouldn't have hurt you. Her voice broke. She went on, haltingly at first, then with a rush of raw emotion, confessing her mistakes, acknowledging the hurt she had caused. She didn't make excuses for Walter or Beverly. She didn't blame me anymore. It was just a raw, painful outpouring of regret, as if by speaking the words, she could somehow rewrite the past. I let her speak. I didn't interrupt. I didn't offer comfort. I simply listened, watched. When she finally fell silent, exhausted, breathless, I still said nothing. The moment wasn't about words. It was about presence, about finally facing the truth she had avoided for so long. After a long moment, I simply stepped aside, opened the door wider, leaving space. Come in, I said. My voice was quiet, neutral, no warmth, but no anger either, just an offer of shelter. Claire hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside, the Ridge Hideaway. She moved tentatively, as if afraid the floor might disappear beneath her feet. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't demand anything. She simply was there, present. Sometimes. The deepest apologies aren't found in eloquent speeches or grand gestures. They're found in the quiet act of simply showing up, standing on a doorstep, broken and humbled, ready to face whatever comes next. For her, that night, facing me again must have been terrifying. For me, it was just the next step on a path I was now walking, alone, but no longer lost. Han treni han gan kong, fai la mot juong thang, no la mot kon juong quan ko cham rani, kong ko loi hua nao juach jua ra, chi ko su hien dien. And the presence, after all the absence, that was where we began. A new beginning, built not on the ruins of the past, but on the quiet acceptance of the present. Forgiveness wasn't instant. It was like a seed planted in broken ground, waiting to see if it would grow. Claire moved into the Ridge Hideaway quietly. There were no protests, no complaints about the small size or the simple life. She didn't demand anything. She didn't expect me to welcome her with open arms or pretend that nothing had happened. She simply stayed. The first few weeks were marked by a quiet, almost strained silence. We moved around each other carefully, two strangers sharing a small space. I continued my routine, my walks, my reading, my trips to the Harmony Clay studio. Claire, for her part, began to change. She started doing things around the house, not because I asked, but because they needed doing. She would tidy up, wash dishes. I'd find her in the kitchen, trying to cook a simple meal. She was clumsy at first, burning things, forgetting ingredients. The woman who had once relied on me for everything at the Pinecrest residence was now learning the basics. But she kept trying. She learned how to clean properly, how to manage the small garden, how to make a simple cup of tea just the way I liked it. More importantly, she learned how to listen. She learned how to care, not just for herself, but for me. The demanding, entitled attitude was gone, replaced by a quiet humility. She didn't interrupt my reading. She sat in silence beside me sometimes, not scrolling on her phone, but just being present. When I worked on my pottery, she would sometimes sit nearby, watching or reading a book. She never commented on my work unless I asked, and then her words were hesitant, gentle. The relationship didn't revert back to what it was before, the deep, unconditional bond, the one where I poured my life into her, and she was simply there to receive. That was gone. It was a new dynamic, more balanced, perhaps, more cautious. There was still a distance between us, a wall built by years of separate lives and recent betrayals. I still acted cool, kept my distance. The resentment I had felt wasn't entirely gone, but it wasn't a burning fire anymore, more like a dull ache that flared up sometimes. George wasn't living with us. I understood he was dealing with his own issues after the fire and the confrontation at Evergreen Manor. Sarah came to visit a few times. I still loved my granddaughter fiercely, and seeing her was a balm to my soul. I made sure she knew she was loved, no matter what was happening with her parents. Claire was quiet during these visits, watching me interact with Sarah, a look I couldn't quite decipher on her face. I continued my own life, my friends from the pottery studio, Helen from the trip. They were my connections to the outside world. They reminded me that my life extended beyond these four walls, beyond this complicated, bruised relationship with my daughter. I was Eleanor now, not just mom, not just grandma, just me. And that person was finding her footing, her strength, her simple joys. Claire didn't ask about Walter or Beverly or George. She didn't talk about the fire or losing their home, unless I specifically brought it up. And then her answers were brief, reluctant. It was clear that chapter was closed for her too, but perhaps in a different way than it was for me. For her, it was a chapter of harsh lessons. For me, it was a chapter of painful release. You can't erase the past. The words spoken, the actions taken, the moments of deep betrayal, they leave scars. But maybe, just maybe, you can find a way to build a future, piece by fragile piece, on the broken edges of it. Not the same future, not the one you planned, but a different one. One where silence can be comfortable, where small gestures mean more than grand promises, and where healing happens in its own time. It wasn't forgiveness in the traditional sense. Not yet, but it was acceptance. A slow bloom of acceptance in broken ground. And then, one quiet afternoon, after all the storms, all the shouting, all the tears, there was a small, simple moment, a moment that, in its own way, felt like a turning point, a moment that reminded me that true peace, the kind that really matters, comes from within, and sometimes it arrives in the most unexpected, most ordinary package. Weeks turned into months. The rhythm of life at the Ridge Hideaway continued, a steady, calming beat. Claire stayed. She didn't demand. She didn't complain. She simply was. Her presence became a quiet part of the house, like the old armchair in the corner or the scent of pine from the surrounding trees. We didn't have long talks about the past. We didn't dissect the betrayals, the hurt. It was as if we both silently agreed that some things were too fragile, too painful, to be handled directly. Instead, we built something new in the quiet spaces. We'd have tea together in the mornings, sitting on the small porch, watching the mist lift from the valley. She would help me in the garden, her movements still a little unsure, but her willingness evident. I'd work on my pottery, and she would simply sit nearby, offering a quiet companionship that I found, surprisingly, I didn't mind. The wall between us was still there, but it felt less like a barrier and more like a boundary, a necessary space that allowed us both to breathe. Forgiveness, in the way I had always understood it, a dramatic moment of tears and complete reconciliation, didn't happen, not instantly, perhaps it never would, not fully. The scars remained, a faint but permanent reminder of where we had been. But in the quiet presence, the small acts of care, a different kind of acceptance began to grow. I watched her, saw her trying, truly trying, not to be the person she had become, but to find her way back to something else. And I let her. I didn't make it easy. I didn't suddenly become the warm, all-forgiving mother of before. But I was present. I was open to the possibility of something. One morning, after I had returned from an early walk, I found a small plate on the kitchen counter. On it were half a dozen cupcakes. They were simple, not elaborately decorated, maybe a little unevenly frosted. Claire was sitting at the small table, looking hesitant. I tried to make them, she said, her voice barely audible. Cupcakes. My favorite treat. She had remembered. I didn't say anything. I just walked over to the counter, picked up the plate, and carried it to the table. I sat down across from her. I reached out, took one of the cupcakes, and looked at it for a moment. Claire watched me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her eyes were wide, a flicker of vulnerability in them. I took a bite. The frosting was sweet, the cake soft. It wasn't perfect, but it was good, edible, made with effort. I chewed slowly, then swallowed. I looked at her. She was holding her breath. I simply nodded. Not bad, I said. It was a small thing, just 2 words. But in that moment, looking at her face, seeing the relief wash over her features, the small, tentative smile that finally bloomed, it felt like everything. It wasn't a declaration of perfect forgiveness. It wasn't an erasing of the past. It was just acceptance, an acknowledgement of a moment, a simple gesture, a small offering. Riley's lips curled into a soft, genuine smile. It reached her eyes. For the first time in a long time, I saw a glimpse of the girl she used to be, before the pain, before the choices, before the bitterness. We sat there, eating cupcakes in the quiet morning light. We didn't talk about Walter, or Beverly, or the fire, or the birthday, or the names, or the slaps. We just ate cupcakes, and in that simple, ordinary moment, surrounded by the peace of the Ridge Hideaway, I knew we would never go back to what we were. The life we had lost was gone forever. But perhaps, just perhaps, we still had a future ahead, a different kind of future, a quiet one, a cautious one, built on acceptance, not expectation. The scars remain, they always will, but sometimes, even broken things can hold a new kind of beauty, and a different kind of sweetness. That's my story, a long journey, full of pain, betrayal, and unexpected turns. But it's also a journey of finding my way back to myself. And if you carry any heavy burdens from the past, any hurt that feels too deep to heal, I hope my story can show you you are not alone, and there is always a way home. And that home is ultimately within yourself. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Remember, no matter what happens, your story is still being written. Make sure you're the one holding the pen. Until next time, take care. So, that is my story. It started, in a way, with a betrayal, a husband's choice that shattered the world I knew and forced me to rebuild, alone, with a child I loved more than life itself. For decades, I was defined by that role: mom, provider, protector. My life became a testament to sacrifice, a quiet dedication to ensuring Claire had everything she needed, everything I could give her. I poured myself out, until there was seemingly nothing left. And then came my 60th birthday. Another betrayal, not just of trust, but of the very foundation of our relationship. Seeing my daughter choose the very people who had caused us so much pain. Hearing her call another woman mom, feeling the sting of her accusations. It was a pain unlike any other. It broke me. It truly did. It forced me to confront the harsh reality that sometimes our deepest sacrifices aren't seen, aren't appreciated, and certainly aren't always returned. But in that breaking, in the raw, painful aftermath, I found something unexpected, a release, a clarity. When I walked away from the Pinecrest residence, when I severed that final, painful tie at the Willow Creek Promenade, I wasn't just leaving them behind. I was finally finding my way back to myself. The journey to the Ridge Hideaway wasn't an escape from life, but an escape to life, my own life. It was a journey of rediscovering the woman I was before mom was my only identity. Learning to garden, to create with clay, to travel, to connect with others like Helen, who understood the quiet cost of constant giving. I learned that finding peace isn't about external circumstances lining up perfectly. It's about finding it within. It's about accepting what you cannot change, letting go of the weight of past hurts, and choosing to build something new solely for yourself. Watching the consequences unfold from afar, seeing the Pinecrest residence burn, seeing the doors of Evergreen Manor shut in Claire's face. It confirmed that, yes, perhaps there is a kind of balance in the world, but the true payoff wasn't in seeing someone else suffer. The deepest sense of liberation came from realizing that their choices, their betrayals, no longer had the power to define me. I was no longer bound by their expectations, their needs, or their capacity to hurt me. And then, the hesitant knock, Claire's return. It wasn't a miraculous reunion, a storybook ending. Life is rarely that simple. The scars remain. The memory of the pain is still there. But in the quiet presence, the shared moments, the simple act of making and sharing cupcakes, there is a different kind of future, a future built not on the naive hope of returning to the past, but on the cautious acceptance of a new, imperfect reality. A reality where we can coexist, perhaps even connect, but where my peace, my happiness, is no longer tied to her choices. My journey has taught me that you are far stronger than you think. You are capable of navigating profound loss, deep betrayal, and the painful realization that the ones you loved most can hurt you the deepest. It has shown me that you are worthy of happiness and peace, no matter your age, no matter your past. And that true peace doesn't come from external validation, but from finding quiet strength and acceptance within your own heart. Every life has its storms, its moments of betrayal, its unexpected turns that leave you reeling. If any part of my journey resonated with you today, if it reminded you of something you've faced, a difficult choice you had to make, or sparked a realization about your own path, I hope you'll share your story in the comments below. We are a community here, finding strength and learning from each other's experiences. Navigating these deep, messy, and often painful parts of life takes courage, and sometimes just knowing you're not alone, that others have walked similar paths and found their way through, makes all the difference. If you want to hear more stories like this, stories of resilience, healing, and finding your way back to peace, to a life on your own terms, consider subscribing to this channel. We're on this journey together, learning to build lives that are truly our own. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Remember, no matter what storms you face, no matter what betrayals you endure, your story is still being written. Make sure you're the one holding the pen. Until next time, take care.